I'm Harry here with Postfly, and we are going to go over how to read the water and find trout today. There's a couple different things that you want to look for when you're reading that water. Some of the biggest ones that we tell folks is the bubbles. Bubbles is the beginning of really teaching you how to read the water properly. So if we're looking out here across the water, we're going to see all kinds of different bubbles. So what does that mean, that bubbles are going to help us? One of the first things that bubbles show us is what direction that water's moving. If we look across here, it just kind of looks like there's a bunch of water moving across. But if we start to break down individual bubbles, all of a sudden we start to see different speeds. We have some fast, slow, fast, some water that's not moving, and we can all tell this by what those bubbles are doing on the surface. So that's the first thing with bubbles. Second is it shows us where there's more oxygen in the water. Trout love oxygen. They're going to be stacked up near where that oxygen is. So when you see bubbles, we know there's a little more oxygen in there. Number three is that bubbles are weightless, so they're being pushed in certain directions. So our food is also weightless when we talk about the nymphs and the dry flies. So if our food is being pushed in the same direction as the bubbles, there's going to be a more percentage of food in that area where there's a more percentage of bubbles. So if we kind of pan and look down this water, we'll see we have a bunch of bubbles spread out, but as we pan down, the bubbles concentrate more down through a run. So we know by looking at those bubbles that I have more of a concentration of food and oxygen where those bubbles stack up. It's always a fantastic place to start while reading the bubbles. Let's move on and we can talk a little bit about what a seam is. A seam is when you have two different speeds of water coming together. So if we look right out here in front of me, we have a great spot that's right behind this rock we refer to structure, and we have some water that's real slow behind that rock. On either side of it we have moving fast water, where the bubbles show us that moving water. That is what we call a seam, where you have slow water meeting fast. Why is that important? Is that those trout will like to sit in that slower water and have the option of all that food and oxygen coming by them, and they can dip into that and grab that food at their leisure and then dip back over to that slow water. So a seam, always important to look for those seams in a run. We also talked about structure a little bit here, mentioned structure. Structure is anywhere a place that is obstructed, that is obstructing the water where a fish can sit there in more calm water. Again, the prime example is this rock right here in front of us, and that water we've talked about right behind it. Great spot for a fish to kind of be held up in some slower water so it doesn't have to work as hard. So when you're approaching water, if you can find a combination of structure, great bubble lines, seams, you're going to have a lot of success fishing for trout.